If your job can't function without you doing some portion of the work for free, then you're not showing dedication by doing that work. You're showing that there is a defect in how your role was designed, and many nurse practitioner jobs quietly rely on unpaid labor while framing it as professionalism, flexibility, or that's just how primary care works. I'm Candace, a primary care workflow strategist and a family nurse practitioner. I've worked in these systems myself, and now I help nurse practitioners recognize when unpaid labor is being normalized, expected, or quietly required. Because if you can't see it clearly, you can't protect yourself from it. If this already feels familiar, there's a way to map where unpaid work is showing up in your day. I've laid out a practical framework for that in my free NP Workflow and Survival Guide. It's linked below, and it walks you through how the workday is supposed to be structured so that the work stays at work. Unpaid labor in nurse practitioner jobs is rarely explicit. It doesn't show up as, "We expect you to work nights and weekends without pay." It shows up in phrases like this: "Oh, we'll figure that out if that matter comes up," or "we all pitch in as things arise," or "it's just faster if you do it yourself," or "we don't really have administrative time built into the schedule, but somehow it all balances out." None of those things sound explicitly abusive or intentionally abusive, but what they do is that they remove any clear container for the work. When I say container, this is exactly what I mean because it matters for everything I teach. Containment means that every task required to do your job has a defined place within paid working hours. When no one decides when or where the work is supposed to happen in a workday, that work doesn't disappear. It spills into evenings and weekends and that mental space that's supposed to be your personal time after work hours. And that is how unpaid work becomes invisible. This is how job creep happens. Job creep is when responsibilities are slowly added to your role without changes in schedule or pay or support until the job that you're actually doing doesn't resemble the job that you were actually hired for. And this is where nuance matters. There are parts of form completion, referrals, prior authorizations that are absolutely part of a medical provider's job. Reviewing and signing the forms, writing the treatment summaries, documenting the referrals clearly and appropriately, completing peer-to-peer calls when required. That is the licensed work of your job. But the clerical execution of that work is different. Things like faxing or mailing the forms, uploading the paperwork into portals, calling the insurance companies for routine prior authorization processing, tracking referral completion, screening portal messages and phone calls. Those are tasks that don't require a provider's license. When there's no workflow and no support staff clearly responsible for those clerical steps, that work defaults to the nurse practitioner. Not because it belongs to the nurse practitioner clinically, but because somebody has to do it. And once you've quietly been absorbing that work long enough, it stops being seen as extra and it becomes expected. That is job creep. Most NPs don't push back because they don't notice. It's because of who they are and what they're carrying. We are trained to be helpful, to be thorough, to avoid being labeled as difficult or not a team player, and to protect patients at all costs. But many of us are carrying culture from earlier roles. I'll give you an example. I worked as an emergency department staff nurse for many years. On Christmas Day one year, the assistant director of the department covered our patients so that we could take a break to leave the unit and have like a Christmas dinner. The kitchen was closed on the night shift, so the hospital provided us with a room temperature Christmas dinner. Leadership genuinely thought that this was some grand gesture of generosity, but what it actually revealed was something far deeper. Leaving the unit to take a meal break, which is a right protected by federal law, was so rare that allowing it on one day was successfully framed as an act of kindness on the part of the bosses. There was no plan to let us take a meal break on the other 364 days out of the year. And that's the culture that many nurse practitioners trained in. So when unpaid labor shows up later on in advanced practice, it doesn't always register as something that is patently unacceptable. It feels familiar. Early in a role, some spillover is normal. When you're new to advanced practice or to a specific organization, you are learning new software systems, you're learning new workflows, learning your colleagues, you are developing judgment in a new environment. So obviously, some things are going to take longer at first. That's expected. But learning is a phase. It's not a permanent condition. If something is truly temporary, then someone should eventually be asking a different question. Is this still taking extra time because you're new? Or is this a sign that the system itself does not support the amount or complexity of the work? If there is no expectation that the job will eventually fit inside of business hours, then what's initially being framed as temporary is actually permanent unpaid labor. And once you've shown you can and will absorb it, it's very hard to give it back. This is where structure matters. The Nurse Practitioner Workflow and Survival Guide walks through how a workday can be deliberately reorganized from pre-visit prep to inbox batching to end-of-the-day hard stops so that work doesn't automatically spill into your personal time. It's linked below. Unpaid labor doesn't just cost you time. It erodes your ability to think clearly at the end of the day. Mistakes increases, burnout accelerates, turnover rises, and it's not because NPs don't care. It's because the job was never designed to hold everything being asked of the person doing the job. So this is not a personal resilience problem. This is a job design problem. Unpaid labor is not a failure of professionalism. It's often a built-in feature of the job, one that you were never warned about. In the next video, we'll talk about why the most conscientious NPs are the ones to burn out first and how caring deeply is often exploited in these kinds of systems. If this helped you to put language to what you're experiencing, I'd like you to start with the free NP Workflow and Survival Guide linked below. And when you're ready, go ahead and watch the next video, Why Most Conscientious NPs Burn Out First.